I'm going to take my slide hammer and make the best attempt I can at straightening out some of these spots that aren't very, probably hard to see in the camera, but there's a nice little wowie right there. So I'm going to straighten some of this stuff out, and then we're going to start building a frame. I want to go full length bed rail with 1/4 inch angle, and then the same deal in the front, and then we'll have a nice base to attach our headache rack. I pre-drilled the holes of where I'm going to bolt it down because it's going to be easier to drill it now on a drill press. It's 1/4 inch steel. Now the next task is going to be cut these little squares out so that it'll slide over this piece right here. Everything's bolted down. We're ready for the next step. Oh, take a look at this. Oh yeah. That's chunks of Jeep. The more I work on this thing, the more of it ends up on the floor and then eventually in the trash can. I've had a few comments criticizing that I'm taking these old Jeep pickups off the market and destroying them, and now somebody can't restore it. I assure you, this is in way worse shape than it looks like on video. It's got holes everywhere. It's rusted through everywhere. This was on Craigslist for a really long time before I picked it up. One of the reasons I got it so cheap. This was on its way to the scrap heap. So is the other Jeep that I haven't figured out what to do with. But anyway, so I'm not destroying some really rare breed of truck. This is a way to get a cool old truck with patina and not have to spend a ton of money on something that's, well, restorable or already restored. The next step is to weld all this together, and then the fun starts. I'm using this 4-inch rectangular tube to go behind the cab. It's definitely overkill. It's 3/16 thick, which is plenty. It's gonna be very heavy duty for our application, but I honestly like the look of the wider tube better. It's the only reason I went with 4x2 instead of 2x2. So what we're gonna do is we're going to measure and have just a generic piece, and then I'll just kind of like pie cut the bottom out in order to set it at the right angle, and then we'll just kind of slowly but surely engineer our way through this thing. So how are we gonna take this headache rack and make it look good? Well, that doesn't look good. I don't like a 90 degree. I like it leaned in a little bit. Somewhere around there, to follow the same angle that you're seeing on the side of the truck. So how do we find out what angle that is so we can notch the bottom? Now it's a small enough angle that I could probably just tilt this up and fill that with weld if I wanted to. But it's easy enough using a speed square, which is what this is if you're unfamiliar. So as you can see, the speed square has these little degree marks. There's a 45 degree, this would be a 90 where it's at right now. And when I eyeball where this piece of steel, let's see, I'm gonna eyeball it right there is about where I want it. I really like the way it contours and matches the side of the Jeep. So what we can see here is it says 80 degrees, that's what lines up here. So 90 plus, minus 80 is 10. So we know we want it at 10 degrees. So what you do is you line up this corner with the other corner, and you turn this until you get to your 10 degree mark, and then you mark your cut. It's very simple. Now I'm going to transfer this line all the way over to the other side using the speed square, and I'm really just trying to get it close. You know, if there's a gap that I have to fill, no big whoop. But this is going to make it to where it's going to be a lot less of a gap to fill than I would have had otherwise. That looks perfect. I like that a lot. So now I don't want to just go from this position to a flat position. I like the idea of doing an intermediate cut and then doing a finished cut there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the tape measure, pull it up. I think I want to start my turn somewhere around 18 inches. So let's see, if we started turning at 18, we could go to like right there and then do something like that. I think that's what we're going for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark 18 on the material, and then I'm going to figure out what angle I want to make the next cut. I think I'm going to do a 20 degree. So we're using that 18-inch mark we made earlier as our pivot point. I already marked 90 degrees. So if we want this outside edge to go in 20 degrees, that if you followed this line, this would be what we're trying to mark. I could eyeball it and get pretty close. If we flip this around, go from 90, I'm going to go to 20 here, off of that same pivot point. Then we mark it. That's the fish mouth that we need, or piece of pie, whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to transfer this over to the other side, try to keep it as square as possible, then cut it out and bend it. So how do we check our angle? Give you a hint. Speed square. What we're going to do is we're going to put the corner of the speed square in that same pivot point right there. And we can see that we are at 68 degrees off of 90, which means that if we go 90 minus 22, that puts us at 68. We're at a 22 degree bend from where we were before. You can keep it right here and that'd be fine. It's just going to make the math for our next cut a little bit more complicated. So to keep from having to deal with some complicated math, because we'll have a 10 degree here and then a 22 degree here, and we want to be able to make a full 90 eventually. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend it to a 25, because it's going to be a little bit easier to make sure that both sides are even, this side and the passenger side, if we can keep it in multiples of 5 and 10, so we're not getting so precise that it's down to the degree. So I threw it back on the vise, I bent it where I wanted it, put a couple of meaty tacks, and I believe we're going to be at 25 degrees. Let's see, right there. Oh yeah, 25 on the money. I'm trying to figure out a way to lay this out to where it's easy to explain what is about to happen here. So basically, we're really just trying to make a 90 degree angle, but we're doing it incrementally. So we started our attempt to make a 90 degree angle at 10 degrees. So 90 minus 10. Then we continued by taking away another 25 degrees. Okay, so 90 minus 35. That gives us a remaining 55 degrees that we need to figure out how to cut this to where everything matches up, and when we're finished, it's at a true 90. So it's really pretty simple, but I laid it out this way so you could see exactly what we're working with. So if we just took this and we turned it to, let's see here, 55 degrees. Okay, so if we set this at 55 degrees, they're both going the same angle now, which is great. But the problem is, one of these is going to have a really big opening, 3 1/4 inches total, once we cut this chunk off. And this is still only going to have a 2-inch opening. That's way too big to fill with weld, obviously. I mean, well, I guess you could, but it would take a long time and it would look really bad. So what we got to do is we got to split the difference. Instead of having this just flat match up with that angle-wise, what we're going to do is we're going to split 55 in half, which is like, what is that, 28 and change? So we're just going to put this close to 28. Here we go, there's 28 right there. I'll mark a line at 28. Now we're going to take this guy and we're going to do the exact same. We're going to go 28. So now as you can see, they're both going the same direction, and our finished product is going to be like 2 1/8 hole and 2 1/8 hole. So now we'll be able to, once we cut this, we'll be able to weld it all the way around and not have these really big gaps to fill. So this entire time I've been making a second one for the passenger side to make sure that everything matched up exactly, and then that way I didn't have to remember every single step and every single measurement. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna weld all this up because it's easy to get to now, and then we'll get to the next step. I'm gonna tack weld each side in their respective location. I'm gonna give it a little bit of a tilt forward to match the cab, which will make a gap for me to weld on the bottom, but I'm comfortable with that. Measure for this top piece, I'm going to go top corner to top corner, and we're just under 48 inches. And we need to make sure that we cut each side 28 degrees, 28 degrees, and hopefully there's no big gaps. We'll find out here in a minute, won't we? A little tall for my taste, but it's just barely tall enough to protect the cab. So I don't want to shorten it up any just for aesthetics. It's definitely gonna be beefy. Shouldn't break. Now I'm gonna add some 1.5 by 1.5 square tube in the middle here, 2 pieces. Looks like we need to cut it. Looks like we need to cut it at 20 and 7/8 would be perfect. So we're gonna put one here and one there. So these will help the load stay centered. I'm gonna cut with a plasma cutter. I'm gonna cut little squares and kind of weld those onto the top later on. But for now, I'm just kind of get it all tacked on there. I'd like to create some kind of a gusset right here, and so what I think I'm going to do is use a little bit of excess of this 2x4 material, and it's going to need to be just a little bit over a 90, so I just kind of guessed. I'm going to cut these out, see how they fit. Well, I got everything tacked into place. Put a nice little bar right here so I can pull this out and finish weld everything I can't reach. And then I'm gonna put some protection for the rear window and stuff. So I got my brother came over, and we're gonna lift this up, turn it sideways, and hopefully if everything goes as to plan, I'll be able to reach all the welds and everything with it still on the truck bed. There we go, just wedged in there. Oh yeah, I can take it from there. A little more? I can tweak it as I need it. Okay. It's perfect, man. Thank you. Yeah. So when I'm welding stuff like this, and I've got really big gaps to fill, what I do is I just weld, I'll weld, you know, a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch at a time, let it cool, and I'll just kind of go through, and then I'll go back filling all the gaps, until it ends up something like this. I grind it down, and then I'll do one final heat pass, and that's what I did over here. So then I can join everything together in one final heat pass. And I think that you get a lot better finished product that way. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm just kind of filling the gaps, filling the voids everywhere, grinding it down, and then doing a final heat pass. I'm gonna take a hammer, I'm gonna hit the back side of this in to where it's flush, and then I'll tack weld it and then burn all that in as well. Same thing on this side. Anytime I can make these gaps a little smaller by just tapping it with a hammer to get everything close, I take advantage. Take a look at that. A lot of it's getting welded together. Kind of went over with the grinder real quick, smoothed a bunch of it out. So now we've got just a couple more things to finish. So I've got a bunch of these little lights from a previous project and one of these. I'd like to integrate this into the headache rack in some way. So I think what I'm gonna do is put this across the very top of the headache rack. I think I'm gonna use just one of these as a reverse light in the middle, and then put a couple of these ember lights on each side. It's kind of like a, you know, a running light of sorts. So I'm going to I think we might be looking at close to a final product. I've got a little bit more cleaning up to do, but I don't think I'm going to go any farther with it. I actually really like the way this turned out. Originally, I was planning on putting some plate across to help protect the rear window, but you know, this has probably had its entire life with the same rear window and there was no protection. Now, I mean, it's got a lot of protection. So I like the idea of keeping some visibility out of the rear window as well. And I just like the way it looks. I think that this doesn't need any more. You know, I could weld some attachment points for straps. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make some attachment points for straps. I'm probably gonna make something that's gonna be able to go under these bolts so it's removable, because I don't wanna have something hanging out that's gonna get in the way and snag onto stuff whenever I put my boat back here or anything like that. Well, I'm pretty excited about how this truck is turning out so far. I bought it just knowing that I wanted to make like a good, just everyman truck, something you could go drive on the street, you could drive on the trail, you could take hunting, fishing, you could fill the bed full of wood, and so far everything's fitting the bill. You know, I'm trying to make it, I want it to look good, I want it to function really well, I want it to be inexpensive to drive, and it's going in the right direction, so I'm very excited to see how this is going to turn out. If you've learned anything from videos like this, and you want to see more content like this, make sure you like the video, subscribe to our channel, and support us on Patreon. That Patreon money is really important. It makes it to where we can buy the raw materials to continue on these projects. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm at BleepinJeep Nate. Our main Instagram is at BleepinJeep. We'll see you next time.